Amazon closing all 7 of its warehouses in the province, laying off all of its 1,700 staff members.
Hundreds of Amazon employees in Quebec are left to pick up the pieces following the shuttering of warehouses across the province. Amazon Canada says it's stopping operations at 7 of its facilities over the next 2 months, which is resulting in more than 1,700 layoffs.
Within 2 months, the retail giant is shutting down all 7 of its facilities across Quebec.
Some of them are crying, actually. Some of them are crying. What we gonna...
Canada just watched one of the most powerful corporations on earth pull the kill switch on an entire province. Within weeks, Amazon announced it was shutting down all 7 of its warehouses in Quebec, wiping out more than 1,700 jobs almost overnight. That kind of move doesn't happen slowly, and it doesn't happen by accident. Corporations don't abandon an entire region unless something underneath them suddenly becomes a real threat. And the speed of what just happened is the part that tells you the story isn't about ordinary business decisions. In a matter of weeks, fulfillment centers, sorting hubs, delivery stations, and heavy item logistics operations all disappeared from Quebec.
Amazon is a private company, so why do they do that? How do they do that? The answer must be asked to
Entirely different.
On this Wednesday night, Amazon shuts down its Quebec operations. The prime suspicions it's because one warehouse unionized.
One day they were supervisors, warehouse operators, delivery coordinators, people who had spent years climbing Amazon's internal ladder believing they had built stable careers. The next day, they were standing outside the gates wondering how they were supposed to start over. Some employees described co-workers crying in the parking lot, asking each other the same question over and over again. What are we supposed to do now? That's not how struggling companies behave. When businesses are losing money or demand disappears, closures usually unfold gradually. Hours get reduced. Hiring freezes begin. Facilities are consolidated. Executives explore alternatives before pulling the trigger on mass layoffs. What happened in Quebec was completely different. Amazon compressed what would normally be a year-long corporate restructuring into roughly 8 weeks. That kind of speed only happens when speed itself is the strategy. Because the faster a company moves, the smaller the window there is for regulators, labor tribunals, or public pressure to intervene. And that's where the real story begins. Quebec happens to be the only province in Canada where Amazon warehouse workers successfully unionized. That single fact sits right at the center of everything that followed. The moment those workers won their union vote, the clock started ticking inside Amazon's legal department. Collective bargaining was already underway. Quebec's labor laws are among the strongest in North America, and once a union certification is recognized, the entire legal structure shifts dramatically. Suddenly, the company has to negotiate under strict labor protections, and if unfair labor practice complaints emerge, the burden of proof lands directly on the corporation. Amazon would have been required to demonstrate in court, with documented evidence, that any major operational decision had absolutely nothing to do with union organizing. That is an incredibly difficult case for any company to win. So instead of fighting a legal battle that could drag on for years, Amazon made a different decision.
It crafts its statements.
Following a recent review of our Quebec operations, we've seen that returning to a third-party delivery model supported by local small businesses will allow us to provide the same great service and even more savings to our customers over the long run. Adding, this decision wasn't made lightly. Quebec is home to Amazon's only unionized workforce in Canada.
We did unionize one facility, and we were working very hard to form unions in other facilities. And Amazon is...
The company framed the closures as a shift back toward third-party delivery partners, saying the change would allow Amazon to provide the same service while supporting local small businesses. On paper, that sounds reasonable, but the timing makes that explanation almost impossible to believe. Labor tribunals had already dismissed Amazon's attempts to challenge the union certification. Negotiations were scheduled. The legal machinery of Quebec's worker protection framework was already moving forward. Then, within weeks of those developments, Amazon announced it would close every facility in the province. The connection between those events isn't subtle. It's a sequence that tells a story no corporate press release can erase. The timeline reveals how deliberate the move was. The announcement arrived in January. By March, the entire network would be gone. Normal corporate restructuring doesn't happen that quickly because supply chains, infrastructure, and customer relationships take time to unwind. But Amazon compressed everything into 2 months because speed protected them. The faster the shutdown happened, the less time there was for political pressure to build or for courts to intervene. Speed became the shield that allowed the company to execute the decision before anyone could realistically stop it. Meanwhile, the human side of the story unfolded in living rooms across Quebec. The workers losing their jobs weren't temporary hires cycling through seasonal shifts. Many had spent 4 or 5 years inside Amazon facilities working their way up through the system. Supervisors had trained teams, managed operations, and believed they were building long-term careers. Amazon's internal messaging emphasized stability, opportunity, and growth. Workers were told they were part of a family. But over time, the workplace itself had quietly transformed into something dominated by productivity dashboards, output targets, and efficiency metrics, where every movement was tracked and optimized. Even that demanding system had offered a form of stability. Now that stability disappeared overnight, Amazon quickly highlighted the severance package it offered workers, announcing that employees would receive 14 weeks of pay. The language used in those statements sounded generous, almost compassionate. But when you look closely, 14 weeks is simply the legal minimum required under Quebec's collective dismissal rules. The company didn't go beyond what the law required. It gave workers exactly what the provincial government mandated and presented it publicly as evidence of corporate responsibility. For a corporation generating revenue that exceeds the GDP of entire countries, that distinction matters, because it reveals that the decision was never about generosity or community support. It was about legal compliance and nothing more. Some defenders of Amazon argue that Quebec simply became too expensive or inefficient as a market. But that explanation falls apart when you look at the numbers. Roughly 2/3 of households in Quebec subscribe to Amazon Prime. Demand for Amazon services inside the province wasn't disappearing. Customers in Montreal, Quebec City, and surrounding areas were ordering regularly, generating the same predictable revenue streams Amazon depends on everywhere else it operates. A market where 2/3 of households pay an annual subscription fee is not a failing market. It's a profitable one, which means the decision to leave had nothing to do with demand. The wage argument doesn't hold up either. Amazon workers in Quebec earned around $20 per hour. Workers in many American facilities earn roughly $15 to $17 per hour. Once you convert currencies and account for benefits, the labor cost difference isn't remotely large enough to justify erasing an entire provincial logistics network. The true cost Amazon wanted to avoid wasn't wages. It was accountability. Unionized workers operating under strong labor law bring legal obligations that companies can't easily sidestep. That's the cost Amazon refused to accept. Where it places those direct jobs makes the strategy even clearer. Amazon isn't abandoning Quebec commerce. Packages will still arrive at doorsteps across the province. But instead of employing warehouse staff and delivery workers directly, the company will rely on subcontracted delivery operators, third-party logistics firms, and gig economy drivers. Those workers perform the same tasks but without the protections, benefits, or legal leverage of direct employees. Amazon keeps operational control over the system while shifting the responsibility for workers onto contractors. The revenue stays inside the corporation. The obligations move somewhere else. The logistical consequences ripple outward as well. Without fulfillment centers operating inside Quebec, the nearest major Amazon hub now sits in Ottawa or deeper inside Ontario. Delivery routes stretch hundreds of extra kilometers. Fuel costs rise. Delivery windows widen. The 2-day Prime delivery promise that built Amazon's reputation becomes harder to maintain in a province that used to have the infrastructure required to support it. Quebec customers will still pay the same Prime subscription fees, but the service itself may become slower simply because the facilities that made it efficient are gone. Across the country, labor organizers are watching what just happened very carefully. When Amazon erased an entire provincial network within 8 weeks of a successful union vote, it sent a message far beyond Quebec. Workers in warehouses across Ontario, British Columbia, and other provinces are paying attention because the lesson is unmistakable. The company demonstrated that it is willing to absorb enormous operational costs to avoid unionization. Whether that strategy succeeds in discouraging organizing efforts remains to be seen, but the signal itself was loud enough that everyone in the logistics sector heard it. There is also a public investment dimension to the story that often goes unnoticed. Amazon's success inside Canada has relied heavily on infrastructure funded by taxpayers, transportation networks, subsidized electricity for data centers, government contracts with Amazon Web Services, and public incentives offered to different Amazon divisions across multiple provinces.